and it is actually a Go. Your webinar is now streaming. Amazing stuff. Um, I hope you still see my screen and you see the slides. All right, yeah. So let's keep going. As I mentioned, that's already that's me, and let's start with introduction and talk about development in general and development with Go under this new concept of Go module in particular. Nope. Let me just mute myself here or just kill this window. Here we go. Right, so everything starts with developers, and we are going to go through the entire like demo in live, and I will show you all the parts of this diagram actually live. But just for now, to just a little bit show you how what we are going to do. Consider it as kind of the agenda for today's webinar. Let's talk about what we are going to do. So first, we are going to write some Go code, and in this Go code, we are going to use dependencies, and obviously we are talking about Go, so our dependencies will be in Go, but you can think about any background that you came from to Go, whether it's Java or Ruby or Python or PHP or whatever other programming language, or even, configuration is code platform that you used before. Everything is very, very much alike. We declare dependencies in some type of format. So we will use the Go modules today, but think about, I don't know, like POM XML or package JSON for NPM or whatever, and we run it locally. When we run it locally, we try to resolve those dependencies from a repository, and obviously the repository that we are going to talk about today is Artifactory. And when dependencies are resolved, obviously the build is successful. But if the dependencies are not found, Artifactory will go ahead and fetch those dependencies from remote repositories. And those remote repositories in other technologies which have central repositories is something like JFrog bin tray, JCenter, or a Maven Central, or NPM registry, or Composer registry, or whatever. In case of Go, it will be GitHub. So we will try to fetch those dependencies from GitHub, or maybe sometimes Bitbucket, but mostly, as you know, GitHub. Once those repositories are resolved, another tool of ours, JFrog X-Ray, if you use it, can then plug into those dependencies and check them for stuff like security vulnerabilities, licenses, etc., etc. That's a little bit out of scope of today's discussion, and eventually they are returned to our local build, to our local Go executable, and this Go executable will build our software. Once our software is locally built, next step is obviously deployed to the source control. And we deploy to the source control, the CI servers kick in. And today we are going to use Circle CI for our example, but there are tons of other options. We actually completely agnostic to which Circle CI you are using, because we are going to use JFrog CLI, and that's a JFrog command line tool to run the Go commands that work and interact with the Artifactory, and this way it will work exactly the same in any CI server. And what we're going to do here in the CI server is exactly what we did on our local machine. We're going to try and build our software using Go and Go modules for dependencies. And exactly the same process will happen. The CI server will ask Artifactory for dependencies, and this time the dependencies were guaranteed to be found in Artifactory, just because we already pre-populated it from our local run. So this build will be successful, and after it is successful, it will deploy the modules that we build and information about the build into Artifactory. And this information will include, and I will show you, a bunch of stuff like the artifacts that were deployed, the dependencies that were used, environment variables, etc., etc. We will take a look at all that as well. And once this is deployed, now we can start a pipeline. That's again a little bit out of our scope today, but obviously then all your quality checks kick in, stuff like integration tests and performance tests and penetration tests and whatever staging tests that smoke tests that you have, etc., etc. And eventually the software will be deployed in different ways or forms into your servers if you use deployable software. If the software should run on your own centers, probably today you will wrap it with Docker, obviously, and deploy in something like Kubernetes, but obviously there are tons of different options. And if you have a downloadable software, and that's an example that we are going to do today, we are going to make it available for download using a distribution platform like JFrog Bintray. And I will show you how that works today. If you have not public distribution, but internal distribution, then you can use tools like JFrog distribution to control the distribution that goes inside your organization. So that's kind of the big picture. Today we're going to do a small fraction of all that. We're going to build it locally. We are going to build it with the CI. We are going to deploy stuff into Artifactory, and then eventually we are going to create a release and push it to Bintray as well. So that's kind of today's scope. Before we dig into it and we talk about stuff which is specific for working with Artifactory with Go, let's recap how this picture, which is, as I mentioned, completely generic for any technology, have what it has to do with Go especially. So since Go 1.11, which was released 2 weeks ago, day before GopherCon, recent GopherCon started, this release incorporated a project which was formerly known as Vigo into official Go. So now there is no need for Vigo executable anymore. You just work with Go modules. And what it does, it actually brings Go more or less to the place where all the rest of the programming languages are. That means no more Go path. You don't need to write your Go code in this specialized directory with the rest of the Go code. You can actually structure your projects in any way and form you like. And I will show you, obviously, an example. No more vendoring. Vendoring, considered that there is a big debate whether vendoring is harmful or not. We, as producers of binary repository for caching and proxying binaries, obviously think that vendoring is a bad thing to do. There are better solutions like Artifactory, and we glad to see that Go community kind of goes in this way and gets rid of vendoring. So instead of vendoring, you have multiple levels of caching. You have a caching on your local machine. And for example, people that come from Java background know that with Maven, like the M2 repository directory, now with Go, we have something very similar. We don't we don't need to commit our binaries, our dependencies into source control anymore, because we have this second level caching of Artifactory of your binary repository. So no more vendoring, and that's great. We have go.mod file that declares the ID of the package and its dependencies. We're going to take a look at that as well, obviously. And then modules are resolved from tag release commits on GitHub. That's kind of the default, or external repositories, which are JFrog Artifactory and others. So today we're going to obviously see JFrog Artifactory. Now, this is all great, and this is all great news, but there is something we need to talk about, and that's the situation of today when you already have dependencies. Obviously, you use Go, you use dependencies, you use libraries, but they are not Go modules anymore yet. So let's talk about that a little bit. Right, so what we have is a situation when we are going to try and build our software. We're going to run Go build, and then our Go 1.11 that knows how to work with repositories will obviously go to Artifactory to fetch the dependencies. If you remember, that's the first step in the previous diagram, and Artifactory won't find any dependencies and will go to GitHub to find the modules there. So far, it's exactly like in the first diagram. But GitHub do have the source files for the the modules, but don't have the zipped module archives that are needed to work with mods. So it will tell us, well, there are no mods there, and our build will fail. So then we can kind of um, fall back to an old system of working with dependencies with sources, and we will pass a flag of you will see no registry. You will say, okay, just get me the sources, and the sources will be served. But the new process that will happen in 111 is that 111 will actually pack those sources into modules and actually prepare them as modules in our cache, and we will see that as well. Once this is done, we can publish then the modules and to Artifactory, and every next build with either inside our team or other teams in organization or our CI server will already find the modules and will be able to work with them. Right, so we pack and publish. Now, now we have a fork. Depending on what we are writing, what kind of Go code we are writing, we have two options here. First, if we write libraries, then we need to create modules out of our libraries. And our modules are just packed Go sources with Go module file with go.mod, and we can pack them and put them in Artifactory together with our third-party dependencies. And then obviously whoever uses it can use both third-party libraries and whatever we just published in their work. Now, if we build a compiled binaries, if we build the end product, if we build our microservices or our downloadable software, then obviously we need to create binaries out of it and publish it to Artifactory and to our distribution platform. So that was kind of a part of a theory, and now let's see how it actually works. So let's do it. Let's start with the source. So let's go to hello go. This is our hello go. This is our go file. And it is very simple. What we have here, we are in package main, and we have a main function, which, by the way, means that we are going to build a binary. We're not building a module. We are going to compile it and then make it available for download, because obviously that's software that everybody in the world want to download and run. We have an import here, and format obviously is an internal dependency, so we don't need anything for it. But for quote library, that's actually an external library that we want to fetch. And we hope that once we declare it in our declaration of dependencies, it will be downloaded automatically from Artifactory and from GitHub, etc., etc. So let's go to Go mode and see what's going on here. Copy paste from getting started of Go. I like this example because everybody are familiar, and it requires the quote library from Russell Cox. And Russell Cox is actually, if we were going to look at our directory, and let's look at it real quick. We don't need the Circle CI now. We don't need the Git. So here are basically two files: Go mode, hello Go, and that's all. All the rest is just a bunch of stuff that we are going to talk about it later. So let's try and build it. So generally what we need to do is we need now to configure Go to work with Artifactory. We need to pass stuff like what is the URL of our Artifactory, and the username and the password and a bunch of other stuff. In order for us to make it simpler, we can just use JFrog CLI. And JFrog CLI, it's very easy to obtain. You go to jfrog.com/ I think CLI or JFrog CLI. here, get CLI. What it was? Here, get CLI, and you'll get the instructions on how to do it. I use Homebrew. You can use any other system of doing it. You see, brew install JFrog CLI Go, and you are good to go. Now, once you have it, you have your JFrog executable. Make sure that you have version 1.19.1 installed, because that's the version that actually supports module. And if we have that, we can actually, after we do JFrog Artifactory config, we configure our Artifactory server. I already did it. I'm going to use a server that is called keys for keep it simple, and I have the URL, I have the password, the username and the password. Everything is already configured for me. Once I did that, I can run stuff like JFrog RT, Go. I want to use Go functionality of JFrog CLI, build, and the last parameter that I'm going to pass is the name of the repository in Artifactory that actually serves Go packages. And for that, I need to create those repositories. So what I'm going to do, and I completely lost my mouse here, which is weird. Okay, now I got it. So I'm going to my Artifactory server, that's my Artifactory server. And here I'm going to run quick setup. Quick setup will create the needed repository to work with specific technology. I want Go, and I lost my mouse again. What's going on? Not Conda. Just trying to guess where it is. Here we go. Okay, so I need Go repositories. I don't need Conda. I don't need Composer. I only need Go. Here we go. What's happening is 3 repositories are created: Go local, Go remote, and Go. Let's talk just a little bit about why 3 and what is the difference for them. So let's start with the remote. The Go remote is the exact repository you saw in the diagram. Its job is to go to remote repositories like GitHub, bring the packages that are required and still not present in Artifactory, and then serve it to the client, to the Go client. Go local is a local repository, which is a storage for the packages that I deploy. So if I do create packages, I will deploy them into Go local. And the third, Go, is a virtual repository that aggregates the other 2. So if I go to Go repository, I will be able to access both modules which are cached from third-party repositories through Go remote, and which are present in my Go local, which I deployed locally. So that basically means always work with Go, and you will be just fine. So once we created those repositories, let's try and run JFrog RT go build Go, because I want to get the dependencies from Go repository in Artifactory. And it fails. 404 not found, and we actually didn't find the sampler that we wanted to find. We didn't find it in anywhere, which is which makes sense because, as I mentioned, GitHub doesn't have the right archives of modules already prepared. So what we want to do now is we want to fall back and get the sources as dependencies and let Go to create a module out of it. So what I want to do now is, instead of using a repository in Artifactory, I'm going to instruct my build to skip the efforts to find an archived module and instead get the sources. So now they are found, and this is our dependencies being downloaded. As you can see, on top of the sampler that I actually use in code, there are additional dependencies that are downloaded. There is a text and others. And those are transitive dependencies. Now, if I look again at my Go module, I only have the quote. But as you can see here, sampler was downloaded and text was downloaded, etc. Now, those are transitive dependencies. If I take a look at my local cache here, I can see that, where is my local cache? Here. I can see that everything was put into Go package mode cache. You can see here that the packages were downloaded, and I actually have them now as dependencies. So now this Go in my user dir, it was used to be my Go path, right? That's where my sources were as well. No more. Now I don't need to put those sources there. Instead, it's just a cache for my dependencies. You can see here that actually my project now is in just a random directory, just a custom directory. It's not a path, or it's not a part of Go path anymore. I don't need to do it. Instead, I can do my Go development in any directory I want. So now we have local. Now we have local packages, which is good, but probably not enough. So, for example, I will give you an example why it's not enough. If we will go to my CI circle, to my CI server, you can see here that my build in CI server fails with exactly the same problem. Quote was not found. And that's because it tried to do the same thing. It tried to download the binaries from Artifactory, and it didn't find it. But since I already have the modules built on my in my cache, I can easily publish them using JFrog CLI for my future usage and for future usage of my teammates and my CI as well. So I'm going to run go rt go publish command. Go is the virtual repository that I want to publish the files to. Self false. My code is not a module. It shouldn't be published as a module, but all the dependencies should actually go there. So you can see we published 3 dependencies to Artifactory, and now we can actually go to Artifactory and see them. Let's filter by package type. We only want to see Go repositories here, and you can see here that inside Go local, I now have the text dependency and also the quote and the sampler. So you can see here that's the quote, you can see the information, and now it is actually available for both my builds and the CI server. So now if I'm going to run again the go rt build go command, this will be successful. Well, it might be because of the local cache. So let's nuke the local cache. I'm going to delete the local cache and now run it again. And now this downloading actually comes from Artifactory. Now that obviously gives me hope that our CI will work as well. So let's take a look on how we enable Go modules in our CI server. So as I mentioned, we're going to use Circle CI. In order to connect your project to Circle CI, you need to provide the Circle CI configuration, and you do it inside .circleci config YAML. So here you can see that I have 2 jobs in a workflow. We're going really quick through that. And there are kind of a similar concept in other CI servers. So in Jenkins, you will do it with Jenkins DSL. In Travis, you will do it with Travis YAML, etc., etc. But the concepts are the same. So here is my build. And for my build, I'm going to use an image which includes Go 111. And as I mentioned, it's very important because that's the version which supports modules. And what I'm going to do is checking out the source and then downloading the JFrog CLI. That's the same thing that I did on my client. and then I'm going to configure it. JFrog rtconfig, that's again the command that I provided. The URL will be Artifactory URL, which is keys.jfrog.io. The username and the password that I provide in environment variables in my in Circle CI, and interactive false. That's a CLI, that's a CI mode, so I don't need any interaction. I just need to be pre-configured. And then I do the exact same thing. I do JFrog RT, go, build, go. Now, there are more metadata that I provide here, and that's the build name and build number. Build name and build number are metadata that will attach what's going on inside go build to build metadata that I'm going to then store in Artifactory. And in our case, I provide coordinates of a build name and build number are coordinates of a build, and that means that the dependencies will be recorded. So once this is done, now I'm going to generate bunch of binary files, cross compile my project by using Go Releaser. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So basically, I build a bunch of files here, and then I'm going to upload those files into Artifactory. So I'm going to run JFrog Artifactory upload all the files from this directory into binary releases local. And binary releases local is another repository in Artifactory that I need to check that I have. So let's also add here a generic. I mentioned to spill the coffee on my keyboard. That was good. Right. It's a lot of fun. Okay, what are the chances that will work? Anyways, we'll see. Generic. Here we go. So now we need generic as well. And yes, I have this directory binary releases local. That's the directory in which I will add the files that I will build. So going back to my Circle CI, JFrog RT upload, take all the targzs that were created with Go Releaser and kind of cross-compiled with Go Releaser, and upload them to this binary releases local. And again, I provide here build name and build number. Those build name and build number will be used to attach the information about the artifacts that I upload to this build information that we are collecting. What else build information can I get from the Circle CI that will be useful? I can obviously collect all the environment variables. So it's right here, build collect environment. And again, I attach it to the same build name and build number. And I'm going to publish all this information together with additional piece of metadata, which is a build URL, into Artifactory as well. So that's kind of the build that previously failed, if you remember, because the dependencies weren't found. But now we publish the dependencies into Artifactory. So if I'm going to click rerun here and keep my fingers crossed, we might see that it is successful. Let's see. So here is my build. And let's see what's going on. It's spinning off my container and check out, downloads JFrog CLI, and now builds. And it looks like you saw the downloads here. And here they are. Those are downloads of our dependencies from Artifactory. And now we have Go Releaser that creates a bunch of binaries. I'm going to talk about Go Releaser in a second when we're going to talk about publishing releases to Bintray. It generated a bunch of binaries, and now we upload all those binaries to Artifactory. We have a green build, and now we can see what happened. So last line of the publish was, if you remember, deploy build info to Artifactory. So I have here a URL that I can just copy, paste, and go there. So let's see what happens. And I'm inside the same Artifactory instance in what we called a build browser. What happened? I don't see any builds. This is weird. Okay, other way I can get to it is through the build browser. Here we go. JBaruch Artifactory Go example, build number 7, and I can go to it and see what happened. So you can see here I have all the information that I captured available for me to browse. There is my artifacts that I built. Here, sorry, the dependencies that I used. Here they are. You can see here 6 files, and that means we have three dependencies. It's a zip file and a mod file for each and every one of them. And we can see here the artifacts, the 15 artifacts that we produced, and those are the binaries for a lot of platforms. There are a couple of flavors for Mac, tons of flavors for Linux, couple of flavors for Windows. All of them are deployed to Artifactory. From here, I can go and take a look at each and every one of them. And you can see here that they are actually right here deployed with the checksums and everything. And the interesting part here is that all the files know exactly how they were produced. So if you look here, you can see that this artifact was produced by Artifactory Go example, build number 7, and there is a link back to Circle CI from here in which you can go to the results of the build and see what actually happened, which sources were checked, what was performed, and all the details of this build. And this is obviously very, very powerful. The same is true for the dependencies as well. So if I'm going to look at any random Go module, so let's take a sampler, for example. Now, this sampler, dude, is, we're not sure, because it's not really listed anywhere. If you look at your Go mod, there is no sampler here. So what does it do here? How did it get there? What's the part of dependency of what it was? You can know that exactly, again, by using by looking at the build information of it. So you can see here it wasn't produced by any build. Obviously, it's not ours, but it was used by 3 different builds, by Artifactory Go example number 3, number 4, and number 7. And from here again, you can go and see and look at this build information, or go directly to the CI server. So if we go back to the build information, we can also see the rest of the rest of the information about the build. So remember, we collected the environment variable, so you can see it's all here, and we can see all the information from our Circle CI, right? And there are like 2 pages, so we can skip and see all the information about Circle CI, but also all the information about like Go path and Go version, and all this stuff is obviously super important. And we can compare this build with previous builds. I can say how build number 7 is different from build number 4. I will see the differences in the dependencies that were used, in the or artifacts that were produced. I can see the dependency, in artifacts, but also in dependencies, and the differences in environment variables. All this information is actually completely scriptable and searchable because it comes as a JSON file that is stored in Artifactory and available through REST API. So you can query all that, and you can use stuff like Artifactory query language to get information to get information about the builds and whatever. So now we are, if I'm going back for a second to our diagram right here, we actually finished step number, where is it? Let's switch to it for a second. Yes. So we actually now finished Step number 8. So we successfully created a local build. We also populated the dependencies in the Artifactory. Unfortunately, we had to do it a little bit manually, and then we have a CI build which is successful and deployed bunch of artifacts and the build information in the Artifactory. Now, next step will be verify and test and do all the right stuff in your pipeline, and then once it's done, we are going to roll it out for distribution. We are going to do the step number 10, this flavor of step number 10, which is available for distribution. You remember we have an executable file. We have here a main package and a main function, and we want all the world to download our amazing sampler and use it. And by the way, if you wonder what it does, we have it right here, so we can run hello and see that it actually does something. And we can play with it. I think I can go for hours just running it because it's so fun, and we obviously want more people to enjoy all this amazing goodness, and we want make it available on all the possible platforms for all the people to be able to download. And that's exactly where a very, very nice project called Go Releaser comes to help. So unfortunately, Go Releaser is not our project, unfortunately, because it's so awesome. And I wish we came with it by ourselves. But it's actually available in GoReleaser.com. What it does all the heavy lifting around releases. It takes care of the Git tags and the release notes and the cross compile, and then it does with the binaries whatever you want it to do. So if you go here under customization, you can see here that it can wrap it in Docker, deploy it to S3, obviously deploy it to GitHub releases, but also deploy it to Artifactory and also deploy it to Bintray. And this is what we are going to do now. So Bintray is a simple case of HTTP put. Okay, so let's start before that. For whoever of you who is not familiar with Bintray, if you go to, where is it? Here, bintray.com. Bintray.com is, let me open a private window here to show you the home screen of Bintray. So Bintray is a distribution hub, which is a software distribution as a service, and it is kind of a backend of your download service, and it supports many different formats. Like you can use it for Docker images and for jar files with Maven and Vagrant and IPM, Debian, what's not. Today we're going to use the generic, like any type format, because we actually upload binaries which are cross-compiled and now just executable files. So what I did here, I created a repository, and repository is a storage for a certain file types, and that will be like generic repository, just binaries. And here I created a repository and package, which is our project, Artifactory Go example. And in our Artifactory Go example, we are going to publish some files into it. So let me discard the old ones, and here we can take a look now at the configuration of Go Releaser. So we have here a Go Releaser YAML file, which actually is a configuration of Go Releaser that is going to run when we run Go Releaser. So project name is Artifactory Go example, that's the project. And I say I want to compile all the configurations, all the possible configurations of those operating systems and those architectures. And I also want to deploy it as an HTTP put to Bintray. So I'm going to deploy archives, and I'm going to use Bintray Artifactory, Bintray REST API. I'm going to put content under JBaruch, binaries in the name of the repository the binaries, and then I'm going to use the project name as the package and the version as the version. So that's the bintray command. And going back to our Circle CI configuration, I'm going to do that only when I build a branches which start with V and then have the exact syntax of the release branches in GitHub. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push a version, to push a tag, and then it will trigger this special build, which is going to use Go Releaser. And the deploy that is going to happen is, again, get JFrog CLI, configure it, build it, remove the binaries, and then run Go Releaser. We actually don't need the debug mode, but it's here. And then run Go Releaser. And Go Releaser will cross-compile, create all the binaries, and then push them to Bintray for us, and we will have our release. We'll have the artifacts and Artifactory. We already did that, and the releases will be in Bintray. So let's go here, and I heard your request to make a font a little bit bigger, so I'm going to increase that. And I'm going to my Circle CI here, increase that as well. And now we will try to do the release. So I already have the release here. What was it? I think that was it. Let's see. Where's my workflows? Go example, master. Let's see, when did I run it? I think that was that. Let's see. No, that was the failure. You know what? Let's just do a new one. Why we try to rerun a failed one? So let's make some change to the code. And you know what? Let's remove the debug, since we decided that we don't need the debug. Let's remove the debug from here. And now we have this change, and we're going to debug flag removed, and we are going to push it, and that will create a normal build, which will upload stuff to Artifactory. That's what we already did. In the meanwhile, we are going to create a new release that will be release 00.2, and it will be no debug in Go Releaser. And now we are going to push this tag (002), and this will trigger our release build. So now going back to Circle CI, let's see what we have here. Factory Go example. Let's see what we have. Okay, so that's the normal build. This will successfully deploy stuff to Artifactory, as we already did. You can see here that's the cross compile running. And now we upload the files to Artifactory, publish the RT, it's all good. And now we have build number 9, and build number 9 is actually a release. It pushes the tag that is recognized by our workflow as the release. And now we actually have similar code that will publish stuff to Artifactory, to Bintray this time. So we have the cross compile, and now we have the put. Now, because of very unfortunate bug in Go Releaser, the build is marked as failure, but actually the files are deployed to Bintray. So first of all, there is an issue that was open, and you are more than welcome to watch it, and probably a new fix will be on Go Releaser soon, so that will fix it. But it actually, although the build is marked as failure, it is deployed successfully to Bintray. So you can see here, if you will refresh my repository, that it is actually, I have 12 new files, and here's my new version. I can go to it and see my files here. And I can see that, whoa, that is broken CSS. Let's try it again. Just wait for all the JavaScript to load. Here we go. How about now? Yeah, you can see here that we have 12 new files, and that's all the Windows and stuff. And I can successfully publish it. And now I have a release, which is actually, I can do like a bunch of stuff for it. Again, I wasn't patient enough. So this is the flow, and going back to my slides here. This is how you do it. Now, what I want to ask you, dear listeners, is do the same. Right. So we have what we call the JFrog Go challenge, and that's just a walkthrough from the part of today's webinar, only the Artifactory part without the Circle CI or Bintray part that you can find in jfrog.com/go challenge. And once you successfully complete this challenge, you will be able to get an awesome t-shirt, the one that I'm wearing just now, and you can take a look and see it, and you definitely want that t-shirt. You already know what to do because you just watched the webinar of me doing it, so please go ahead and do that. We have a little bit of time for your Q&A, and as I mentioned, please use the Q&A panel there is a question that I want to ask you, and I will be more than happy to hear your feedback on how the webinar was. And not less important, here the question number 4 is, what do you want to see in the future? And you can see them right here. So that's our sources, this is our mod file, this is the configuration of Go Releaser, and this is the configuration of Circle CI. So you have it right here. Another question, how would Go modules or Artifactory work with monorepo approach? That's a great question. And basically, if you remember, your Go path stuff was about monorepo, right? So when you had Go path, you have one repository in which you had all your Go code and all the dependencies kind of merged together. Now, it kind of stays the same, but not really. Your source of your organization that you use, your monorepo, will still work the same, right? So you won't have those GitHub repositories for each and every microservice. Instead, you will have one repository with all the source that you work with, but the dependencies will be externalized to archives inside this cache and inside Artifactory. So your repository with your source will remain as monorepo, but the dependencies will now be external. Now for Artifactory, there is no difference. Artifactory will work exactly the same, and when you build modules, again, your modules will be packed as zip archives and upload it to Artifactory. So I hope that answers that. Another question is regarding all this no registry back and forth. So let me bring back the part when I explain it, and that will be this slide. So, right, so you remember we actually tried the build and we failed, and then we kind of go back and say, okay, forget about modules, let's bring the sources and all this stuff, which kind of feels weird, especially considering that we use JFrog CLI, which kind of wraps all the back and forth. And that's a good question and a valid comment. Next version of JFrog CLI 1.19.2 will encapsulate this back and forth in just a go build command. So it will run go build. It will try to get the binaries from Artifactory. Artifactory will try to get the binaries from GitHub. If none of it found, we will build those binaries and deploy them to Artifactory all transparently. So it will be kind of a long-running command because it will have to do all that, but it will all be in one command. So you will run Artifactory go build and JFrog Artifactory go build, and it will do all the required work to actually make it happen. And that's awesome. Another question, do you have an example without JFrog CLI? So the differences, I don't have an example, but I can summarize you the differences. The differences without JFrog CLI will be you need to configure Go modules to work with Artifactory instance, and that basically means setting bunch of environment variables. Now, if you didn't find a certain module and you want to fall back to getting the sources, you will need to delete those environment variables, download the sources, build the modules, and then add those environment variables again to work with Artifactory and deploy stuff to Artifactory, and then you will be able to work with it. And then it means that you need to declare the same environment variables for each and every machine that you want to run, that you want to use Go with Artifactory, for each and every developer on each and every CI server and agent. And basically, it's all the same, just a lot of additional headache. So I hope I convinced you you don't really need an example without JFrog CLI, basically. I think that's more or less it. We are about time. Maybe I have time for one additional question if you have, and if you don't have it, thank you very much for attending. As I mentioned, the recording is already out there. It's live on YouTube. The source, let me just put the slide with my GitHub here. So you will be able to record it one more time. There's Artifactory Go example. And I think that with that, I would like to thank you for attending and invite you to future webinars from JFrog. Oh, okay, there is one more question. And we have 1 minute. Okay, let's try it. Why don't you recommend vendoring? You mentioned that vendoring is not recommended. I kind of mentioned also why. I'll try to reiterate it again. So vendoring was a solution for a suboptimal package management. When you are not sure that your builds are reproducible and your package management will be able to fetch the exact same dependencies constantly, you would say, okay, I will create my own copy of all the dependencies and kind of will stash them with my sources. So every time I need them, I will have them in place. And then it means that you're going to deploy a bunch of binary artifacts into your version control. And that's generally not recommended by any producer or host of version control, which includes GitHub and Atlassian and who's else. Version control is not a good place for binaries. When you have Go modules and you have Artifactory, you have guaranteed repeatable, reproducible builds. And then basically means that you don't need vendoring anymore. You have your local cache, which is completely disposable, by the way, because if you have it, your builds will be faster. If don't, all the dependencies will be downloaded. And then you have your in-house artifact repository, Artifactory in our example, which guarantees that the dependencies that were used for your build will always be there. So best case scenario, you run your build, all the dependencies are in your local cache, and you're good to go. Worst case scenario, the dependencies are not available in your local cache, but they are in Artifactory for sure. And that means that you can guarantee download reproducible builds without making a copy of your dependencies and keep them for you as a stash. So that basically uh, explains why vendoring is not needed anymore. I hope that makes sense. We're out of time. If you do have additional questions, my Twitter is @jbaruch, exactly like my username in GitHub. So feel free to connect to me on Twitter and ask additional questions over there. Thank you very much and goodbye.